The budget for the financial year 2022-23 was released on February 1st of this year, and it primarily deals with infrastructure development and public investment amidst the recovery of the economy from the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year's budget was tailor-made for economic recovery, and this year the government has taken measures to bolster public investment, productivity, and growth. The government has ramped up its capital spending plans to a record 2.9% of the GDP to revive the economy, and additionally, there is an ambitious borrowing plan to reduce the fiscal deficit projected at 6.4% of GDP. Noteworthy features of the budget include substantive fiscal and tax reform, revised expenditure allocations for agriculture, defense, and state-wise financial capital. Underlying all these objectives are the financial constraints faced by today's government. I now invite Ms. Riddhi Lakhiani to share her views on one of the biggest aspects of this year's budget, public policy.
Hello and good evening to all. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and to be speaking and discussing on the public policy aspect of budget 2022 and 2023. To begin with, it's important to know the context in which the budget has come. So this year, as likely with the COVID situation, the economic growth in the previous year stood out to be 9%, which was not enough to address its recovery from the COVID shock. The inflation rate reflected through consumer price index was 5.6%, which was well under the RBI's tolerance band. However, the food inflation rose over 9% and wholesale price index even higher, around 13.6%. These inflationary pressures have persisted due to rise in oil prices and supply chain disruptions. Being a global economy, a rise in US interest rate has also led to outflow of foreign exchange and foreign portfolio investment from India to abroad. Given this, the finance minister focused on the idea of growth with the vision of the next 25 years to enter into what is called as Ambedkar. So the increase in capital expenditure from 6 lakh crores in the last year to 7.5 lakh crores, which accounts for 24.5% increase in the capital expenditure, is one of the key defining features of this year's budget. This expenditure is important to address the issue of low capital utilization level in the economy, given that the proposed expenditure gets realized. If it does, it would help in addressing the problems such as the slow pace of structural transformation in the economy, risk of middle income trap, and would boost the level of private investment in the economy by building infrastructure. This reflects the Keynesian concept of multiplier effect with impetus on transparency and tax stability. However, Keynes' core idea of states supporting the level of demand as key drivers of economy was being missed. The weakening consumer spending resulted due to fall in real incomes and savings could have been a policy which could have been addressed through a combination of tax breaks for middle class and cash handouts for the poor. However, this was not seen, and the issues such as rural-urban poverty, inflation, and fall in levels of earnings and unemployment remained partially unaddressed. So the policy of Pradhan Mantri Gati Shakti, which provides for work on 7 engines of growth, namely roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transport, waterways, and logistics infrastructure. The broad context of public infrastructure, which the program envisions, potentially can be transformative if the impetus is laid on its implementation. However, while reading the budget, I could figure out that the budget is short on the details and specifics and provides only some figures for the roads and railway component. The budget also lays down the policy of production-linked incentives which is a scheme spread across 13 sectors, which were introduced in the past year, which has an outlay of rupees 2 lakh crore. This budget this time comes up with 2 additional production-linked incentives for manufacturing of high-efficiency solar modules, batteries, and swapping policy. And the impetus is given onto electric vehicles ecosystem. I would like to reiterate the point which is already made by several renowned economists across the country, that the focus should be on efficient implementations of the already announced production-linked incentive schemes of the government. Now, the government is also focusing on sustainability and climate change, and it intends to adopt green energy. So incentives taken in this respect will help in achieving a goal of 280 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2030. In addition, the government will also issue sovereign green bonds for funding green infrastructure. These projects will have a positive impact on the environmental and climate effects and will help to reduce the carbon intensity of the economy. From green bonds to electric vehicles and increasing solar capacity to organic farming, the budget has moved towards the goal of green economy and sustainability. The policy which is known as the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme will be extended to cover the next fiscal year as well, which guarantees cover of rupees 5 lakh crore to help medium and small enterprises. This was in continuum of the policy that was introduced in context of COVID to help medium and small enterprises. So spending outlays on several key sectors, which includes healthcare, rural development, and vital jobs, and providing National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, also known as MGNREGA, have shrunk as a percentage of overall expenditure in the budget estimates for the fiscal 2023 from the revised estimates for the current year, even if it has reduced marginally. The fund allocation to MGNREGA is crucial because there exists a fact that in this policy there is a deficit of rupees 15,000 crore, and the state do not have enough funds to roll out. The center has has also reduced its subsidy budget for food, fertilizer, and fuel by around 26%. This might be a factor which might lead a rise in food prices in the country. Estimates for this fiscal saw subsidy bill soar. The reduction in the subsidies is majorly coming from the fact that subsidy bills of the government due to the pandemic increased as it offered a free food program, and it faced the burden of higher international fertilizer prices. A reduction in government's expenditure reflects its keenness to stick to what is called as fiscal consolidation, with the budget projecting a narrowing of fiscal deficit to 6.4% of GDP in 2022 and 23 from the revised estimate of 6.9%, which kind of reflects its priorities, as debt GDP ratio in 2021 and 2022 was as high as 89.3%. There has been a new scheme which is called as PPP mode, which stands for Public-Private Partnership, for the delivery of digital and high-tech services to farmers and to promote what is called as a blended capital to finance startups in agriculture and rural enterprises. To go along, the RBI has also issued a digital rupee, which would leverage blockchain and other related technologies. currency and promotion of digital bank, which will also provide impetus to a digital payment system in India. The government also promises to bring 1.5 lakh post offices under the core banking system with the aim of financial inclusion, allowing for online fund transfer between the post offices and commercial banks. Government spending on healthcare, which was expected to increase, have also been reduced. This is crucial because given the COVID-19 situation that happened in the country, specifically in the second wave, there has been expectations that the government would work more on public health infrastructure. However, there is some announcement of a national tele-mental health program which aims to addresses the mental health problems that have been exacerbated by the claustrophobic lockdowns and which have caused anxieties due to the pandemic. The budget also aims that spending on digital education would be 6% of the GDP. However, to achieve this objective, the allocation of education should have almost been doubled compared to what was in the previous year, but that did not seem to happen. The policy introduces 200 TV channels in various regional languages, but given the situation that India's 80 crore people are poor, and out of them 50 crore come under Ayushman Bharat scheme, given that the scheme covers only those who do not have access to housing and other amenities, there exists a question of accessibility. So I would like to end my talk by making a crucial point related to what should be our approach when we study budget or any other policy, that none of the policies should be just about future, but there should be a continuous assessments of the objectives which are being laid down. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lakhiani. That was a very valid point you made at the end, and also your enlisting of the public policy objectives of the budget were very conducive for our minds. And now I will invite Ms. Anwita Ghosh to delve a little deeper into the budget.
Hello everyone. I am Anwita Ghosh, and I am deeply honored to be a part of this panel discussion on the budget of the financial year 2022-23. I will primarily be talking about the finance and banking sectors of this budget, and of the policies regarding that sort of thing. So, this year's budget, it has in the budget speech, Mrs. Finance Minister had she had talked for a long time on developing the roads and railways. She has also talked about about a Parvatmala National Ropeway Development Program that is she Parvatmala program that basically she making of ropeways on hilly regions and in congested cities that where where conventional mass transport is not feasible. So for now, contracts for 8 such projects of total length 60 kilometers will be handed out in this year, and this will be taken up on public-private partnership mode. And it is supposed to be an ecologically sustainable alternative to conventional roads in hilly areas. Along with that, the budget has focused on some inclusivity and a lot. There have been so Then moving on to the micro and small industries, because some certain industries like hospitality and related services are yet to regain pre-pandemic levels of operation, especially those run by smaller enterprises, and because of the pandemic and people traveling less, the emergency credit line guarantee scheme has been provided additional credit. So of this total cover of rupees 5 lakh crore, this there has this is including an extension, the extension of cover by 50,000 crores, that is being held exclusively for the hospitality and related sectors. So also for the smaller industries, the credit guarantee trust for micro and small enterprises will be revamped with a required infusion of funds that will facilitate an additional credit of rupees 2 lakh crores for micro and small enterprises. This is supposed to expand employment opportunity for in these sectors. And there is also she has also the talk of this raising and accelerating MSME performance program that will outlay that with an outlay of rupees 6,000 crore over the next 5 years. And this is to make the MSMEs more resilient, competitive, and efficient. So while the uh, while the allotment of budget to the MGNREGA has been reduced by significant amount, the budget aims to increase employment either through these MSMEs and or through infrastructure development projects. Um, but even so, this because Narega has been a major employer in the rural sectors and mostly for unskilled work, this uh, more and more people have come to trust it, and this will probably have a negative effect on employment as for and the in 20, and now by 2022 the budget also aims to bring all post offices, that is 1.5 lakh post offices, into the core banking system. So this means that people can access their accounts through mobile and net banking, ATMs, and provide transfer of funds between the post office account and bank accounts. So this is supposed to make it useful for farmers and senior citizens of especially in rural areas. So now post offices will, and now because that there is a higher emphasis on making India a digital economy. So post offices will now provide services more as a bank than what its services has traditionally been over the last several years. And as for an increase in digital banking, there has been a proposal to set up 75 digital banking units in 75 districts of the country by scheduled commercial banks. So this is in celebration of 75 years of Indian independence, and hopefully this will be expanded to cover more districts over time. So, and financial and digital payment ecosystem will continue to receive financial support uh, in this financial year. So, as for uh, there has been some um, there has been some reduction of compliances and a repeal of several union laws to in order to increase the ease of doing business in this country. So this, and also the insolvency and bankruptcy code has been has been uh, has been changed a bit in order to make sure that unviable firms are able to wind up their operations in 6 months instead of the currently required 2 years. So, also several IT-based systems have been set up for rapid registration of new companies. Now, as for the this year's budget has also increased the outlay for capital expenditure from that is the outlay for capital expenditure has been raised by 35.4% from to 7.5 lakh crores in 22-23 the financial year. So and this is will be 2.9% of the GDP. So and along with this, there have been government is planning to raise money through green bonds, which will this is specifically to mobilize resources for cleaner and greener infrastructure, and this is supposed to be deployed in public endeavors that help in reducing carbon intensity. So now here is a question of whether the people who take up these green bonds are actually interested in the greener infrastructure, or they are just because cleaning up the environment is also a major concern along with the development of the country, and but then several conventional, it is also slightly expensive to actually revamp production processes to make it compatible with the newer infrastructure that is supposed to be coming. So along with this, then several foreign institutions will be allowed into Gujarat International Finance Tech City, that is the gift city in Gujarat, that it's located near Gandhinagar. That is to facilitate the availability of high-end talent for financial services and technology. So this will be free from domestic regulations except those set up by the International Financial Services Centers Authority. So and along with this is basically to provide a financial education to and create more people that in the finance sector. Along with this, there has been an international arbitration center set up in Gift City for timely settling the disputes that may crop up. As for taxes, while there has been little to no changes in the basic tax rates, the government has introduced a 30% tax on virtual digital asset gains. That is, any gains from virtual assets, and that is excluding the application of surcharges and cess on the asset gains. Now, on these virtual assets, the government has not allowed for the setting off and carrying forward of losses. That is, in an asset portfolio, when certain assets do not perform well, often an investor can set those losses off with the assets that have performed well and have brought in a profit. However, now as for these virtual assets are concerned, the government has said that any profits will be charged at 30%, and these profits cannot be used to offset losses in other assets. That is the profit and loss of each asset has been clearly has been set up with inflexible boundaries. Also, there is no deduction for expenditure in virtual assets except for the cost of acquisition. Along also, as for the basic tax slabs, those remain unchanged. And the benefit of lower tax rate, which at currently 15% on dividend received by Indian company from specific foreign company, is to be withdrawn from 1st April 22. So now the basic tax rate remaining unchanged a uh, is a bit of an iffy move, because several people have lost their jobs in this pandemic, like household incomes have declined, and because of several pay cuts by companies, or several and the higher inflation rates, especially food inflation and higher cooking oil purchases, because like most Indian cuisines often depends a lot on oil and on cooking oil, and because cooking was that has and because of this higher mm, inflation rates, that means now people are left with less disposable income in terms of purchasing power. Also, in this year's budget, there has been no mention as for indirect tax. There has been compulsory sequential filing of GST returns that has been um, proposed, and there so as for this year's budget, there has been absolutely no mention of the smart cities uh, that had been talked about for the last several years, especially in the years leading right up to the pandemic. And now that things are slowly limping back to normal, I think they should have at least talked a little about what is to be done with the projects that are already in progress, instead of just talking about what is to be done after this. So I will end my talk with a single point, with as I agree with um, Riddhi, that instead of focusing on the future and making promises, the budget really should have focused on the present and on the year, especially on the last 2 years that have been leading up to this point. So thank you for allowing me to an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Ghosh. That was very well put. Um, your points towards the end about looking into the future are very valid, because this year's budget does not entirely go into the whole last year's NMP, National Monetization Pipeline, towards the fiscal policy part of it. Thank you for telling us about the MSME credit facilities, the tax reforms, as well as the stress on some parts of the tax base that have not been given any relief. So, thank you. And now we will go to Mr. Vivekanand, who will talk about economic recovery. Vivekanand, I request you to switch on your video. I understand that you have network issues, but we will try to accommodate that.
Okay, no problem. But there's a little bit network problem. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Hello. Yeah. Hello.
You are audible, Vivekananda.
Okay. Good evening to all of you. I'm Vivekananda, master's student of Center for Economic Study and Planning, JNU. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team for giving a platform to present the view to the panel. As we know, this discussion is the based on Union Budget 2022. My presentation is the based on recovery from COVID impact Indian economy. So, uh, I, I, in my presentation, I'm going to show this budget is not this budget is not proper solution for the Indian economy recovery from COVID pandemic. Uh, I will show our view and our logics and by datas. Uh, Indian economy recovery is not a proper recovery from the whole economy. First evidence of this is low base effect. Low base effect that that presume 2021 2021 to 2022 growth rate low base effect cover the actual size of growth that the Indian economy has experienced after the COVID lockdown. Compressing the compressing the GDP level to the pre-pandemic GDP level, we can see that there is only 1% growth in the size of Indian economy during the 2 year. Actual growth rate is only 1%. And this is a so this 1% is so that Indian economy has reached the pre-pandemic level, which is a good sign. Which is a good sign, but the recovery is not as great, not as grand as the uh, claim as the claimed by budget, which is claimed by budget. There's not so in this data. And second thing is the our Indian economy problem is facing the demand crisis. Indian economy demand crisis is the related to income uh, income level. When income level is high, then demand is high. Then level is low, then demand is low. The budget documents show that the final private consumption level in Indian economy did not reach the pre-pandemic level. This is an impact. This is an important indicator of the high of the mass of people in economy, as this is an indicator of the pursuing on the uh, people's whole purchasing power of household. The fact that the private consumption level did not reach the pre-pandemic level, it's so that the lace of the income during the pandemic has reached not been reached in precondition before pandemic, which point toward a larger problem of demand deficit in the economy. Demand deficit is the also demand deficit is a like demand crisis when people not have any income, then how to purchase any things? And if people not purchase any things or any services, any goods through the market, then uh, uh, that's a reason for the uh, bu- that's a reason for the going to beer going to uh, going to low condition in the during low condition in Indian economy. A one logic is also so that K-shape recovery is one another view in this 2022 budget. K-shape recovery is also K-shape recovery so that uh, in the point of time and the point of time fixed point of time, formal sector, some sectors are growing, but some sectors are not growing, and some sectors are falling. Which sectors are growing and which sectors are falling? Growing is formal sector, corporate sector, and agriculture is growing, but in the same time, formal sector, informal sector, service sector, and allied sector is falling, not growing. And this growing and not growing or falling is condition is so the K-shaped recovery. K-shaped recovery. It is a and this recovery shape is not good for our economy. And third things is unemployment and employment crisis. Our Indian economy faced pre-pandemic from the pre-pandemic unemployment condition and employment crisis. The employment rate is the economic so jobless that took place during the pandemic has not pre-pandemic level. Pre pre-pandemic level yet to the pandemic level which were already very high. There higher there is a high unemployment rate or extremely extremely varying to the prospectus spelling varying to the prospectus of economic growth, as not only does the so uh, a- uneven recovery of the Indian economy point the word as unequal growth, where the mass of prepare, where the mass of people suffering. This is the because jobless growth is also there in the our Indian economy. Uh, Unemployment rate is the pre-pandemic to after pandemic is recovery V shape, reverse V shape. Our our economy is also facing unemployment problem, and unemployment problem is the reverse V shape. Reverse V shape like uh, uh, a pre-pandemic level. Unemployment reached is the pre-pandemic level. When we compare the pre-pandemic level unemployment to in this time recent unemployment rate, uh, then we saw see the this time unemployment rate is more than pre-pandemic level. It's so that the reverse V shape unemployment rate is still in the worst condition in the pre-pandemic level. So it all it's so that the entire economy has not yet recovery from the pandemic. A lot of to the step will also have to be taken the government for the tackle this problem for the improving and for the uh, recovering from the COVID impact. So, and two or three things more. Uh, Government, I think government take some mistakes uh, because if we see the recent budget, uh, jobless job crisis is also our Indian economic problem, but Indian economy so but yeah, manrega problem in uh, budget cut allocation is also a problem, also facing this problem because government uh, continue cut the budget allocation, and not any urban is urban employment scheme are imposed. uh, so there is some problems, there is some problems. So if government tackle this problem, so uh, this problem is end. So that is a point for me, to me, and it's a view of mine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Vivekanand. That was that was quite good. You made some very important points, I believe, about the unemployment and the associated spending on social security, where we see government trend moving away from the social security sector. So now we can move on to our final panelist, Ms. Ritu Kumar, who will speak about another very important aspect of the budget that we can all are that we are all shareholders in, which is education. So,
Am I audible, Anirudh?
yes, you are.
Okay. So, good evening to one and all present over here. Myself, Ritu Kumar, and I'm pleased that I have been given an opportunity to be here. So, the Union Budget 2022-23, it has been pegged as a growth-oriented budget, right? But what is growth without development? As we all must know, the Human Development Index HDI, it ranks countries in three tiers of development, and undoubtedly education is one of them, be it in the form of literacy rate and also the gross enrollment ratio. Now, education has been accorded as a high priority in development policy in most countries, including India. Despite the intention of expanding education, the expansion of education has been slow as compared to many developed as well as some developing nations. Given the crucial role that education plays in the socio-economic development of a society, public provision of education has always stayed an important arena of government intervention in India. Nevertheless, the last 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the COVID-induced lockdown, have sort of given us a glimpse of what our social service sector lacks, and education specifically is no exception to that. But again, should we just talk about the COVID impact? Like, has everything done because of the COVID? What were what was the scenario of education sector in India prior to the pandemic? In this context, I would just cite a simple statistic by the NSS, which says that 3.2 crore children of the age group 6 to 17 were out of school in the year 2016-17. That is a huge figure, of course. With regard to the education budget 2022-23, the first thing that will come to anyone's mind is to weigh it against the promises made by the National Education Policy 2020. The NEP is in its second year of implementation, right? And its guidelines show a very holistic and expansive work to be done in the education sector of India. But with the so-claimed 11.86% increase in the total budget for education, will it be possible? I would also like to point out that the claimed 11.86% increase in budget is in absolute terms. If we take the persisting inflation into account, the picture will be altogether different. And it is also very evident that we are very, very far from the NEP cited 6% GDP for education. In fact, the 6% GDP target for education has now been kind of eluding us for more than half a century, starting from the Kothari Commission of 1964, coming to NEP 2020, and 2 years post the announcement of NEP 2020. Undoubtedly, the union budget needs some applause for the digitalization of education. The sector will definitely appreciate the budget in line with promoting human capital through digital tools, such as the One Class One TV channel program proposed under the PM E-Vidya scheme. It has laid out a progressive vision which the government holds in capitalizing India's demographic dividend. The budget kind of takes a visionary look, a more of a futuristic budget, you can say, in the context of education by setting up digital universities and collaborating with world-class educators. There has been a decision to expand the PM E-Vidya from 12 to 200 TV channels and developing high quality e-content in regional languages, which aims to benefit students who have suffered from the pandemic. Like I said, in sharp contrast to what has been claimed as the 11.86% increase in total education expenditure, there has been a fall in India's largest school education scheme, namely the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. Compared to the year 2021, there has been a fall in the total budget allocation of the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. In addition, the allocation under digital e-learning program, which includes under its umbrella the PM E-Vidya scheme, has been reduced from 645.61 crores to 421 crores. Now, I would like to say that it is grossly mistaken to conclude that learning gaps, not only during the pandemic that have been created, prior to the pandemic as well, it is mistaken to assume that these learning gaps will be bridged by TV channels. TV can never be a substitute for classroom learning. No doubt, TV is a good source of information, but it does not have the potential to improve the teaching learning method of communication, which is very much needed. Just give me a second. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the disruption. So what I was saying is that we cannot substitute television with the face-to-face teaching which is required. The initiative of the TV is very good, but it should have been complemented by safe back to school and face-to-face quality education, which the budget announcement kind of lacked. Moreover, the pandemic highlighted the need for more teachers, better infra, and more classrooms in rural areas. But the budget not only failed to emphasize on the pathetic and miserable conditions of the rural classroom, but it also made no mention of teacher training. And I guess most importantly, what I want to say about this education budget 2022-23 is that there has been an excessive focus on digitization. Being myself a student who has been privileged to continue my education despite the pandemic for 2 long years, I am not against digitization. What I want to say that it should rather be used as a supplementary means to the traditional education system that we have been following. And digitization of education should never ignore the harsh reality of India, which shows that only 8% of rural students and 23% of urban students have access to internet. Now, in my opinion, the budget should have announced some financial support to some particular sectors. The first one would be Early Childhood Care and Education, the ECCE, which has been brought under the field of primary education with 3 to 6 years children, demanding specific support for Anganwadis. It must have demanded proper reading materials, equipment, infrastructure, and also the expansion of midday meals to include breakfast. Not only this, it can also bring under its umbrella the secondary level students. Further, it is quite obvious that the COVID-19 pandemic has been more of a disadvantaged thing for the girl child. Although the NEP talked about gender inclusion, no such mention has been made in the budget. Instead, the Padhna Likhna Abhiyan adult education scheme, which focuses on the basic literacy, was not allocated any funds this year, which is crucial. Allocation for Ministry of Women and Child Development has declined from 2.46 crores to 2.35 crores. This definitely is not going in the line which we kind of thought it would. In addition, special training for teachers for equipping themselves with the 21st century teaching deserve the mention for sure. Now, 21st century teaching doesn't just mean the use of e-platforms that we are now very much used to post 2 years of pandemic, but it means quite a holistic development of the teachers, both at the school and college level, so that they can deal with the problems of the student, as we know that the pandemic has taken a toll on the mental health of the students. So, the offline-online disruption has had quite a crippling effect on the education sector. Focus on digitization alone is minuscule, given the tremendous effect the pandemic has had on little children in the entire country. Thus, significant investment should have been made in sectors, most importantly at the primary level. This had to be done in order to reap India's demographic dividend. The government should kind of involve NGOs, parents association, also students like us, the UG and PG level students, to conduct surveys and get a grassroots level picture of the actual education sector in the country. Government should increase policy interventions, provide special scholarships for the girl child student, and promote girl child education in various possible measures. Nevertheless, like I said, digitization is also a good step, but going parallelly with the offline teaching mode and giving an indicator as to how the offline school will function in coming days would have been a better one, of course. Further, it's too early to judge, and the proof of the pudding will surely lie in the effective implementation of the budget. Before I wind up, I just want each one of us to think on a question, to just think upon the question that in a country like India, where the rural-urban divide is so vast, is digitization the right way for us to proceed in the union budget? And when we think of this question, I also want us to think about the philosophy of Gandhiji, which stated that when you bring a policy, you should think about the impact it has on the last person in the queue. I think that's all I would like to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kumar, about speaking on the education policy that the government has focused on this for this budget. Now, I would like to reiterate again for all the attendees that if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. So now that we have finished hearing everyone's viewpoints, I have a few notes that I have taken, and I would like to hear additional thoughts from the panelists. Um, so, Ms. Riddhi Lakhiani, you spoke about you gave an overall picture of the public policy in the government that has been mentioned in the budget. I would like to hear your thoughts on what you think about the agricultural policies, specifically in regard to the implementation of the Kisan drones for crop assessment and digitization of land records and etc. So the debate that is who will pay for these drones, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, so agriculture is a focus area that stands out in every policy making decision, because given the rate of structural transformation, we want that agriculture is more productive and modernization must happen. But they should, I think, look into several other aspects. For example, the policy of the government that provided farmers with 6,000 rupees per month. So, because of inflation, that has already been reduced to 5,000 per month, which the budget does not encompasses. And more, in addition to this, the number of beneficiaries of such policies of the government have reduced, and even the procurement by the government has reduced. Uh, in addition to the reduction in fertilizer and food subsidy that I mentioned in the discussion. So these are the immediate issues that need to be addressed in agriculture. Yes, of course, drone and all the digitization that the government is looking upon is a very innovative and technology driven step. But in line of this, we should not forget what we immediately need to focus on. So that's my take. Hope it answers your question.
Yes, well, that's an interesting point that you make. And I think that we can see that this budget is indeed very forward looking and in all aspects, because yes, we have we're coming out of the pandemic, and the budget was released amidst the Omicron wave. So yes, I think that the budget stance is warranted. And continuing in lieu of this forward-thinking perspective, I would like to ask Ms. Anwita Ghosh, who spoke about the banking sector as well as fiscal reform and tax. I want to hear your thoughts on another interesting part of the budget, which is the tax on the digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and why the government, in spite of there being a big demand from some stratas of our economy for relief in taxes due to the COVID pandemic, there has been a lack of tax relief.
I believe because there has been a reduction in foreign aid, because now all economies are concentrated on getting back on track themselves before they send aid anywhere, and also because the government itself has itself is trying to raise money by any means it can. So uh, that is probably also for even though the percentage of uh, percentage of these essential development indicators of the budget allocated to education and healthcare especially, while the percentage allocated to healthcare was larger last year, now this year education makes up almost 3% of the budget, and healthcare, I'm not sure about what the percentage of healthcare, but yeah, even so it is still a major concern even this year as we deal with Omicron wave. So I, I have a belief that given all the infrastructure projects and the inclusivity projects and the green sustainable development projects the government has taken up along with this new education policy and everything else, the government actually is in need of funds, and that is probably why it is trying to raise some through taxes instead of making everything go into bonds.
Oh, that does explain the tax issue, but then again, we see you know a lot of credit rating agencies are either downgrading or keeping the Indian economy's sovereign credit rating constant. For example, I have read that Fitch Ratings has said that the budget is short on growth enhancing structural reform plans and has no new ideas for revenue generation apart from, like you said, uh, keeping the tax constant, and also provides less clarity on reaching the fiscal deficit target of 6.4%. So would you please share your thoughts on the whole credit rating dilemma?
Well, I guess pandemic has been a major hit for the country. Uh,
Yes, I do think that
mm,
the
yeah,
uh,
I think Moody's has given India's sovereign rating to be Baa3 stable as of this is an article from 4th of February that I've opened up right now. It says that Moody's has kept it constant, and it is said that the conservative assumptions have left room for the government to respond to prevailing macroeconomic and pandemic risks over the next year. Yeah, but even so, like medium term deficit target of 4.5% of GDP by FY25, it's still a very vague pathway that's been formed. So there is no solid plan on what's to be done over that.
yeah, that is probably the concern for these agencies. I remember last year's budget, the incumbent KV Subramaniam was very aggressive on the fact that India's sovereign credit rating is probably undeserved, and he explained why. So moving on, we can see that Mr. Vivekananda, you spoke about the overall trend of the government, where the government is not yet is making policy that is reaching far beyond our current situation, where we haven't yet reached pre-pandemic levels of growth. And you spoke about unemployment as well as MGNREGS allocation, which has reduced, even in spite of the fact that there is at least around 7,000 rupees crores of unpaid wages. So could you please tell us where the role of individual states is expected to fill this gap that the union government is moving away from?
Uh, you see the union. Can I repeat your question, please?
Yes, yes. So you spoke about MGNREGS, the allocation has reduced, and the government has still, we have not yet reached pre-pandemic levels of growth. So there is a disconnect between these two. So please tell us where perhaps individual states are expected to come in and fill this gap.
Okay. Okay. Uh, I say we see the Manrega budget allocation is cut, reduced by the government. Uh, we see the unemployment rate is still high comparing the pre-pandemic level. Pre-pandemic level, but after pandemic level and after pandemic level, the, the is also high in compared to the pre-pandemic level. Manrega is the key factor. Manrega is the a booster, like a booster employment booster. Government is reduce this allocation of budget. There is a loophole of this. I think a loophole of this budget, and uh, in this budget, not any urban employment scheme, not any employment generation scheme is not in there. So there is these two things. And this is not included in the budget for the job job growth. You say the individual or state state how to state encourage how to state encourage or how to state boost this boost this condition. We see if government states encourage the Manrega in more and more expenditure in public sector, and I also say the K-shaped recovery recovery condition. In this condition, formal sector, corporate sector, and agriculture is growing, but the informal sector, service sector, and allied sector is not growing. Uh, in this condition, government government interfere in informal sector, service sector, and health sector for the growing in this sectors. These are the some way to improve this condition. So this is a way to the recovery from this pandemic condition.
Okay, okay, yeah, sure. The social security is now becoming more of a like a state subject. So that's a valid point you make. Now I have a last question to Ms. Ritu Kumar. There you spoke about education, and I found that you did bring up the important point, which is the move towards digitization. But there appears to be a missing link with the measures taken for education in the country and the situation that we see on the ground. So, moving towards digital solutions implemented using a top down approach, it does threaten to have a weak potency in this regard. Would you perhaps care to give us the government's perspective towards doing this instead of helping the students from the ground level?
Sorry, your question was not clear. Could you please repeat?
Yes, sure. So moving towards digital solutions, you please tell us the government's perspective towards this, because we see that the ground level situation is in dire need of addressal.
Okay, so the government talks about creating digital universities, like I mentioned, and providing e-content in regional languages of, which is of high quality, which they suppose will help students. But that is not the scenario in actual, because in India, hardly a few people, hardly a few students have internet connectivity, or the facility to buy to buy the internet connections. Like one of the panelists mentioned that the disruptions due to COVID has led to fall in income level too. So with India, like it said, India lives in its villages. So with India living in its villages, where forget about networks, there are no mobile phones or televisions, so the expansion of televisions from 12 to 200 channels and everything will not be helpful. So I mean, I'm not sure about if digitization should in fact be highlighted to this extent in the budget.
Okay, okay. Okay, I understand. That is true. So now let us open the session to the house, and we have a few questions from our students. So I will just pick one and ask you. We have a question from Sharat Kumar. How feasible is this higher infrastructure spending given that the fiscal deficit is at a higher level, and won't this crowd out private investment? Um, Please feel free to answer, any one of you. I think.
Yeah, I would like to go on this. So, the target of 7.5 lakh crores of capital expenditure that the government aims to spend. When we see in the past budgets, even the last year's budget, which targets had to be 6 lakh crores, that was not achieved. The government did not realize it. But the fact that government aims to achieve such a big expenditure is useful if it builds up the environment for private investment. For example, infrastructure like roads and railways and all of that I discussed. So if that happens, then it would create a nice environment for investment. But the key is that government should spend that much.
Okay, okay. Sure, sure. So there needs to be some commitment towards this venture. But I think we are encroaching a little with the time limit. So I would like to call upon our Vice Chancellor of Dr.B.R. Ambedkar School of Economics University, Dr. N.R. Bhanumurthy, to say a few words.
Thank you, Anirudh. I've been listening this panel discussion, and first of all, let me thank all of you for being part of this initial panel discussion. And I would urge all the respective universities to make this as a annual event, and not only talking about the budget, but once in a while there should be some general discussion relevant for Indian economy. So, but very interesting discussions, very interesting points. I also see that very interesting questions have been raised. So we are very happy with the way it has gone, and I'm sure all of you have benefited from the panel discussion. And One small thing, I just wanted to tell you, and then I'll stop there. So the budget is one document which contains, which touches the lives of everyone, right? And I think when we, in future, when we actually try to analyze, I think it's very important to hold on to some part of the budget and then try to analyze a little more in depth so that it will be useful for for understanding the budget and also for it also helps you analytically going forward. I saw one question on like higher infrastructure spending, won't it crowd out private investment? So this is an empirical question, right? So like that, each and every issue that we discuss today are empirical in nature, and there are no finite answers. Many answers are time varying. Okay, again, as Riddhi pointed out, so right now it might crowd in, but not necessary that every time it has to crowd in. So there is something called absorptive capacity, okay, which I don't think there is any discussion on in the overall post-budget discussion. So one needs to really assess all these things empirically, and not necessary that whatever the relation that we study in textbooks need to hold on all the time and everywhere. So it's right now, when we are in the crisis, the larger expenditures would have helped the economy much more compared to when the economy is actually recovering fast. So you cannot spend on that. So what I'm trying to say that fiscal policy, whether it should be a counter-cyclical policy or pro-cyclical policy. So this is a very, very pertaining issue, and it's an issue that we need to really keep discussing and estimating. And within the fiscal deficit also, some expenditures can be counter-cyclical, some expenditure can be pro-cyclical. Okay, when you are getting more revenues, tax revenues or non-tax revenues, you can spend more on the infrastructure, so that becomes pro-cyclical. And when there is economy going down, you need to have fiscal stimulus so that it can work as a counter-cyclical. So the quality of expenditures, they all become very important, and I think just want to tell that public policy making is very, very challenging compared to just studying what we study in the textbooks. So with that, I would like to thank all of you, and I'm sure this is just a beginning, and I do hope our university students and the students from other universities will work together, and will have some kind of a forum, within the country, so that you can have a regular discussion points. Thank you, Anirudh. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanumati, sir. Your points were very relevant. Before we end, I'm so sorry about endorsing the time limit. I would just quickly like to give a conclusion. So we at Dr.B.R.Ambedkar School of Economics, University, Bangalore, are grateful for your participation in today's panel for the Union Budget 2022-23. It was a very stimulating discussion with several important contributions with regard to aspects of the budget. I would like to personally thank each of our panelists, Ms. Riddhi Lakhiani, Ms. Anwita Ghosh, Mr. Vivekananda, and Ms. Ritu Kumar for your participation. I would like to also thank organizers from our university, Professor Bipin Soni, Shantanu Sharma from the MSc second year, Utkarsh Gupta for the technical side of it, as well as Saptoshi Pahari. So before we close, can I please request all of you to switch on your video for a screenshot? Okay, I just give me 1 second. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was that was very nice. Thank you so much for cooperating. We would like to see this as a recurring annual event, actively promoted by all the participating universities. Uh, I request all of you to follow us on Twitter at base_university as well as LinkedIn. And with this, we will wind up the session. Thank you very much.